Welcome everybody to another episode of the Primetime Night Owls, as we've called it most of the season, thanks to one of the listeners. I can't remember who it was at this point, but Matt, we're here on a Monday to kind of wrap up the regular season and to talk about one last regular season game. We know the Buffs are headed to a bowl game. We don't know where. Well, we kind
We
of
know
do.
where. We know
We
where.
know we know where, but we don't know where.
Right.
It's not official till Sunday. Um,
Right.
so obviously 52-0 against Oklahoma State. Great way to finish the regular season. And we talked about it in our previous video, but for fans that didn't see that, it's pretty much a lock. The Buffs are going to be in the Alamo Bowl on December 28th in San Antonio. Just the way bowl tie-ins work. That's where they're probably going to be. I would be shocked if it's not the Alamo Bowl. And they're probably going to be playing either Iowa State if they happen to lose this week or BYU. So that's probably what it's going to be. I'll be surprised if it's not, but we'll find out on Sunday. But Matt, start off your initial thoughts, Oklahoma State and how the Buffs finished up.
Yeah. Before we get there, do you want to just quickly for those people because they'll be in the comments about can't Colorado play Miami in the Holiday
Yeah.
Bowl? Do you want
Okay.
to you want to just want
Yeah.
to recap that real quick?
Here's why not, because bowl tie there's contracts and bowl tie-ins. No, you can't just have your AD say, "Well, we don't want to be in this one." We want to be in this one instead. Well, no, that's not how it works. So,
No.
um, although they're in the Big 12, they're still a Pac-12 team as far as the bowls go because of conference realignment. The 12 schools that were in the Pac-12 are sticking with those agreements this year and next year. So with that, with the Pac-12, CFP takes their 12 teams. Whatever teams are left, it starts with the Alamo Bowl. They have the first choice of all the Pac-12 bowl eligible teams not in the CFP. So that's going to be well. So Oregon is a quote Pac-12 team. They're in the CFP. Arizona State could be in the CFP if they win this week, right? But even if they're not, you got their top choices are going to be Arizona State and Colorado. They can pick whoever they want. They could also the other teams are Washington State is there, Cal, USC, Washington, and who's the other one? There's another bowl team that's 6-6. Can't remember who it is, but there's
It's irrelevant.
that's it's irrelevant. There's four 6-6 teams that were in the Pac-12. So, but basically, Alamo's going to choose between ASU, and Colorado, and I don't know why they wouldn't choose Colorado. So, especially when Coach Prime has come out and said Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are going to play in the bowl game. If you're the Alamo Bowl, why would you not want to have those guys playing in your bowl game? So it's going to be that, and the contract is quote Pac-12 versus Big 12, which is why CU would be the Pac-12 representative against a Big 12 team, which is going to be either Iowa State or BYU.
You want to hit those monetary numbers one more time too?
Yeah. So the other thing is the people that want to, can they decline it? They're not going to decline it because, and I don't know what the numbers are exactly this year, but at least last year, it's the payouts. I mean, the Alamo, for people that don't know, is really, it might be the best non-CFP bowl. I mean, my most high profile, they pay out like a little over $8 million last year. The holiday was a little over 6 million, and the Vegas Bowl was 2.9 million. And
Right.
so you don't turn down an $8 million payout to go to a $2.9 million payout because it's Las Vegas. And frankly, teams lose money on bowls generally. So it's not like CU's getting 8.4 million. I think the way it works is they split that with the other team, and after expenses, then it kind of goes to the conferences. But the expenses pretty much it's going to be about that, about the 4 million bucks or whatever to get to the bowl. So, in 2016, for fans that don't know, the Buffs lost money going to the Alamo Bowl. It cost them more than what they got back from the Alamo Bowl. So, um,
Paid to get your ass kicked.
right, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
basically, you go to the Alamo Bowl, you kind of break even. You might maybe there's a couple hundred grand or whatever. You
It's
go to
not
the
about the money, right? At
right.
the end of the day, specifically.
But you go to the Vegas Bowl and you might lose out on 1 million or 2 million bucks just to get there. So they're not going to do that. So at some point you got to say, yeah, it's business too, and you don't want to lose money. So
Yeah, it's just more about recouping the cost, right? To the best of your ability. And we
Right.
know CU has spent a lot of money here lately, upgrading everything and bringing everything, into the leading edge. There's been a heavy price tag on that,
Yeah.
assuredly. So
Yeah.
they need it where they can get it, no doubt about it. But yeah, I'm again, as you and I have talked about, I know the initial kind of like, well, we've done this before, but it hasn't been for a long time, and
Yeah.
certainly not with Shadur and Travis and this whole group
Mm.
of seniors, which we are very lucky, folks, that they are all going to play. Okay. And that
We
Coach
think
Prime
so.
is,
We think so. Yeah.
well, that most of them, I would
Yeah.
imagine most of them will play unless they're
Yeah.
injured or something like that already or dealing with something nagging where it's like, maybe I could give it a go, but probably a bad call. I imagine we'll see a lot of these guys that were dinged up at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Probably, I imagine we'll see Augusta back in there, right? Like even a guy like Jimmy Horn, I would expect to play in the bowl game, right?
Yeah.
Wester, all these guys, because that is another great opportunity to showcase. Now, again, we've talked about it. It'll be interesting to see if the other team approaches it like that as well, because if not, it could be a pretty quick first half, which it is what it is, but make no
Yeah.
mistake, you're going to have to deal with Shadur and Travis. I promise you that. And Shadur confirmed it himself the other day too, and he told us, as you and I have spoken about, that look, we're not dipping out because if we do, what precedent does that set for the rest of the team? And
Right.
it's a veteran laden team, and if those two guys don't play, it ain't right to ask everybody else to play, and they know that as well. And they also know that they're the identity right now,
Right.
and
Yeah.
until that changes, I credit them a lot for taking pride in that responsibility of upholding that, of honoring
Right.
that commitment, because it's not done a lot. Okay. And I've heard a lot of people, well, just be smart. Be smart. They're going to be them. I
Yeah.
mean, as we've heard, I mean, that you get injured in a bowl practice just as easily as you get injured in a bowl. I mean, God
Right.
forbid. So
We've seen
it is
guys get injured in pre-draft workouts.
100%. And I saw Luther Burden, who's one of the top wide receiver prospects out of Missouri, decided to opt out of his bowl, which, look, I mean, it's tough to knock a guy like that, too. So
Right.
it is what it is, but we're just very fortunate that this is the way everything's going to play out and they're going to honor their commitments.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, the fans that I totally get it. Like, um, ideally, you'd love to see a CU versus Miami, Shador versus Cam Ward type of bowl game. I
Right.
think that's a pipe dream type of deal because it is unique that Shador and Travis would play because what's the likelihood of Cam Ward if Miami's not in the playoff? What incentive does Cam Ward have to play in a bowl game? He's got a lot more to lose than Shador, in
Yeah,
my opinion.
it would only be about reputation, like, duck in the smoke. Like that's the stuff. But obviously we all understand
Yeah,
the financial implications behind it. I don't know what would happen in that scenario. I just don't believe that the Alamo Bowl would ever for a second think about turning CU down. I don't care
yeah,
if ASU loses, to
right.
Iowa State. It
Mhm.
doesn't really matter. People aren't going to really tune in to see Cam Scattaboo, as great as he is, the people's
Right.
champ. But they will for Shadur and Travis, as has been evidenced by television numbers for 2 consecutive years.
Well,
And I'll tell you this,
right.
around the holidays, you're going to want something like that to watch too.
And the bottom line is the Bulls, yeah, they want great matchups, but the big thing is that they want money and they want ratings.
Yeah, right,
And so,
right.
the game is on ABC. So it's another a national network TV game, by the way, if you go to
Mm,
the Alamo Bowl. It's a Saturday, I think it's a Saturday night, like 5:30 Mountain Time on ABC. That's pretty darn good, right?
yeah.
And so for the Alamo Bowl, you want ratings, you want butts in the seats in the Alamo Dome, and nobody's going to do that more than Colorado. So, and
And it'll be a different environment from what we've seen them compete in since
yeah,
they've arrived here. We haven't seen a dome game yet since
yeah,
since Coach Prime has started here in Colorado, so that'll be fun too.
yeah. And honestly, it's one of the reasons what we were talking about before why I kind of like the BYU matchup is it's hard to see. Maybe they will, but it's hard to see some of those BYU guys opting out because it's not like BYU has a bunch of big time stars that you would think would opt out. They got some really good players,
Hmm.
but who's more likely to opt out of a bowl, Cam Ward or Jake Retzlaff,
Right. No,
Ratzlaff or
I
whatever it is? So
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
you're more likely to see a a fully loaded BYU team than you would be maybe something else. And frankly, I'd love to see it. The Buffs. You started off by saying the Buffs didn't play any of the top three in the conference. They're probably going
Well,
to have a
we
chance.
we talked about that before we started.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah, yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember, but they didn't play
Yeah.
any of the top three in the conference, right? But now they could have a shot. And so now, for those that want to see what the Buffs look like against the top three, they might have that shot in the Alamo Bowl. So we'll see.
Yeah, to me, it's less about the matchup and more about the opportunity to see these
Right.
guys go one more time. If I'm
Right.
going to be honest, I don't care if it's BYU or Iowa State. Neither one of them. Give them whoever,
I don't
line
care
them
if
up, and let's play.
I'm writing a preview as we're doing this. The CU women play Tennessee Tech tomorrow. I don't care
Oh,
if CU is playing Tennessee Tech. I don't care who they're playing.
I
The
agree.
the the chance to see Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter one more time in a Colorado uniform, and frankly, to see Cam and Craig one more time, and to see Levanta Bentley and all these guys that have meant so much to
Yeah.
Colorado, just to see them one more time. I don't care who it's against. I don't care if it's in the Alamo Bowl or what did Carter Statmeyer tell us the other day? He goes, I don't care if we play in a parking lot, we'll be ready to play. I don't care where we see him play. I just want to see him play one more time.
I agree. I agree.
So let's get back to with that. We got to see him play one more time at Folsom on Friday, and wow, what a
Yeah.
senior day! I don't remember the last time there was nothing like that, but I don't remember the last time there was such a celebratory senior day. Probably 2016 when they beat Utah, but 52 nothing, and for Shador to do what he did, 438 and 5 touchdowns, and Travis 3 touchdown receptions, a pick. LeJontay Wester went nuts. The defense a shutout. I mean, that was everything you want, right?
Yeah, tough really to ask for much more except for maybe a clean second quarter, but I think all things considered, we'll settle with 52 to nothing and be just
Right.
fine with it. It was an amazing send-off. They bounced back defensively from the Kansas game. We had spoken about that where we talked about our expectations for what it would look like. And I talked about, hey man, there's an additional emotional hurdle you have to get over here after blowing it to Kansas. And
Yeah.
that turned out to be the case, by the way. All week, I don't know how you felt, but I definitely got that vibe last week that it was kind of like we're turning the page, but we know what just happened
Oh
and
yeah.
we know the
Mhm.
implications of it. So there was a bit of trying to put on a brave face and say the right thing, but they knew what had happened, and credit to them for going out and finishing the right way and showing us that that's who they really are, because it had been uncharted territory for Colorado to rally this quickly defensively this year.
Right.
And sometimes a performance like that can spiral you, but it didn't. It didn't, because as you brought up last week, and I told you, look, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't count on it. That's not indicative of who they are. And they proved
Right.
that in their final home game by absolutely dismantling a team that was in the title game last year.
Yeah. And the closest thing to it was going into halftime in Lincoln down 28 nothing, and they shut out Nebraska the rest of the way and then hold Colorado State to 9 the next week. And I think this was more impressive, but my point is that what we saw out of this defense this year was if you punch them in the mouth a little bit, they get ticked off
Mm,
and they're going to come back and they're going to be better for it. Whereas we've seen a lot of teams in the past that you punch them in the mouth and just go land the knockout punch because they're done. This team has been really good. I mean, they lost 3 games, but every single time they lost a game, they came back the next week with a big win. So,
yeah.
um, you know, that's impressive. That's a hard thing to do, I think, a lot of times. I mean, look at BYU, right? They were 9-0. They lose. They almost lost to Utah. Then they come back and lose the next week. And what did they do the week after that? They lost again, and they couldn't recover from that. You see that all the time where teams they lose once and that turns into a second loss. Well, that never happened with Colorado, and so I think that was one of the more impressive things. And yeah, you want a game back, but you also you escaped a little bit with Baylor. I ultimately think, Matt, that things evened out, and 7-2, that's what Colorado was this year in the conference. That was a really nice season. And yes, you can always look at things and say, man, that was a pass interference against Will Shepherd late in that K-State game. If they would have called that, the Buffs maybe tie that game, maybe they win it. If you show up better in Arrowhead, but they didn't. Bottom line is it was a great regular season. And I
Oh
think I
yeah.
think I think it's where I think that's just what they were. They were a 9-3 type of team.
Yeah, again, missing the conference title game does not take away in any way, shape, or form what they have accomplished this season, which is why we've talked about how you have to evaluate this year in multiple contexts.
Yeah.
One context in being the total turnaround from 2 years ago, and one, a team that could have made a conference title game this year. So while you say that, they blew their opportunities. You and
They
I are going to
did.
disagree.
Yeah.
You and I will probably end up disagreeing a little bit
Well, no,
because
I agree. They blew an opportunity. I'm just saying ultimately I think it evened out.
oh, okay. Yeah,
But
I
they
guess
did.
so. Yeah, that's all I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
hey, it did. I guess it did even out, but at the end of the day, do you feel like Colorado's the best team in the Big 12 right now?
I do. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm saying is that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be representing the conference in their
Right.
championship game. So at the end of the
Right.
day, they did blow an opportunity. Now, again, as I'm going to say, it doesn't take away from a 9-3, 7 and
Right.
2 season, the best in school history since 2016. Okay, this is a remarkable achievement. All right, but to get into that game a little bit more specifically, just closing it out. Cam played better, and he is like a tone setter for that defense. He even brought it up
Yeah.
after the game. He said he feels like when he plays well, the defense plays well. And I think there's some truth to that, right? He
Right.
came out and set a tone. And, I thought the defensive line held up better. Linebackers were great. And, it's tough to want to talk about this game without immediately going to Shador and Travis. But, Brian, that's probably what we should do because they
Right.
deserve that because of their brilliance. And I just want to make sure other people understand it's not taking away from
Yeah.
anybody else, but what we saw this year was so rare that by the end of the season, I just was totally grateful. I really didn't have, okay, could they have been better here or there? Yeah, and moving forward, they need to fix some stuff up. But man, like I'm standing out there on the field after the game, doing my post game video, and I'm going, we just watched the last hookup connection between these two guys. The last time Shador will throw a pass, the last time Travis is going to catch a ball, make an interception. Like next year, games are going to get tight at home, and the first thing you're going to think about is, oh man, what if you imagine if they still had Travis out there, right? This is
Right.
the time you need a Travis.
Right.
It'll happen. It'll happen. They'll have great players, but that's how irreplaceable those guys are. And Coach Prime brought that up like, hey, we're going to replace some guys who you don't replace. So we're
Yeah.
going to do the best we can and we're going to hit that portal hard. But make no mistake, you don't just replace these guys. It's going to be a by committee thing. You're probably not getting a game breaker next year, a true game breaker like Travis can be.
Yeah.
You'll get some guys who are going to have to develop into having that potential. And so,
Well, I think they've got one already though.
well, who's that?
They might have two.
Omarion?
Omaria Miller and Draylon Miller. The
Yes, but
question
neither
is just
one of
who do
them
they,
are Travis. That's
I
my
agree.
point.
I'm just
That's
saying,
my point.
yeah, I think they're going to be phenomenal players, but you don't have Shador throwing the ball.
And they're not Travis. Like
Right.
I love those two
Right.
guys too. It has nothing
Yeah.
to do about that. Again, it's
Yeah.
just like neither one of those guys are going to go number one in the draft.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's my point. So don't think that I'm taking away or putting anyone else down. I'm
Yeah.
trying to highlight how special. I
Right.
just looked on NFL Mock Draft Database, which compiles 68 draft big boards from draft experts, 365 first round mock drafts, and 346 team specific mock drafts. Travis and Shador are 1 and 2 off the board.
Right.
That does not happen. That does not
Right.
happen.
Right.
And so I don't care who they bring in, it's not going to be the same. And so I wanted to soak up every last moment. I got emotional twice in that game. I'm standing right behind Coach Prime, Shiloh, and Shador before senior day, actually 3 times. Jimmy's walk with them and his walk with them as well.
Yeah.
That was when it was like, wow, it's over. Like that's it. Here for a
Yeah.
good time, not a long time. Like now they got to reset. But wow, look at what they've done. And it wasn't like I was crying. It was just more like, man, it's so touching for me as
Yeah.
somebody who's lived in Boulder for 25 years now
Mhm.
that this is what's happened to our town, and it's pretty cool to see. So that was one, and then the other one was the last touchdown to Travis. That was when because I knew they'd take him out after that, and so I said that's the last pass Shador's ever going to throw. And look at the catch Travis made. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's just how did he catch that football?
Yeah.
Just another one of those. And I was watching back afterwards just to listen to the crowd. Like if you don't even watch the play and you just listen to the crowd noise, they went, oh, like it's one of those instead
Yeah.
of a woo. It's like, oh, I cannot believe what I just saw. And I'm going to miss that sound ringing through Folsom Field.
Well, and the cool thing about that was that it was down on the end by the students,
Yep.
right? And right before, I don't know if it was right before it, but
The
a
students
little
who
bit
weren't in town, by the way,
right. That's true.
and it was still full.
That's true. So,
Yeah.
but real quick, before that, like, um, yeah, last play of the third quarter, they're on the other end, right? And that's when Shador gets picked off on the tip pass.
Yeah.
And they were about to go in to make it 45-0. They were up 38-0 at that point. Yeah, I think had CU scored there and not been picked off, that was it. And as soon as he threw that pick, sitting next to my colleague Pat Rooney, he goes, "There is no way they're letting that be the last pass Shador throws
No
at
way.
Folsom Field." And so I think they would have been done there. But then you kind of knew, even with because 2 plays later, DJ McKinney has the pick six, which makes it 45-0. And even then, I'm thinking, you can't bring him back at 45-0. And Pat's like,
Sure you
yeah,
can.
but when the last pass is a pick, they're not doing that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. They come back and they have one last drive.
There was still a
That's
lot of time. There was still a lot of time at that point too in the fourth quarter.
yeah,
Wasn't it
but you
like
had
over 10 minutes?
well, yeah, you had a whole quarter. I mean, there was like 14 minutes left. So,
Just there's still a lot of time, Brian.
or yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, though. But like
Yes, of course I know what you mean.
in any other setting, I think they would have been done at that point. But
Probably.
what made it cool was that you didn't want to see the interception, but that they were able to have that one last drive and cap it off. And so yeah, it was really cool. I do want to say though, yes, Shador Travis, I agree with everything you said. I do have to give some props to that defense though, because holy cow, the way they were, the way that they responded, and this is an Oklahoma State team that scored 48 points the week before. I know Texas Tech's defense isn't great, but then Tech goes out this week and totally somehow plays defense. But they
Right.
scored 48 points a week before. Malachi Smith, or however you say his name, was phenomenal against Texas Tech.
Is
Ollie
it
Gordon,
Malachi?
I have no
Sorry.
idea.
Is I mean maybe it's Malachi. Is it
I
That's
don't know.
interesting. That'd be the most interesting way to spell Malachi I've ever seen.
And
That
actually,
would make sense.
it was my son that pointed out to me. He goes, "I'm looking at this." He goes, "I think that might just be an interesting way of spelling Malachi." I'm like, "You might be right." So I don't know. But anyway, Smith
Huh.
he had over 300 yards against Texas Tech. Ollie Gordon had his best game of the year the week before against Texas Tech, was 130 yards away from 1,000. Two comments on that. If you're Mike Gundy and you just are watching film of Colorado giving up 330 yards on the ground, and you got Ollie Gordon, what are you doing giving him the ball 4 times? 4 times. You know what that told me? They didn't give a crap about that game whatsoever. But and I thought I honestly am stunned that Mike Gundy didn't come out there saying, "Well, if nothing else, let's get Ollie Gordon his 1,000 yards." That tells me he doesn't give a crap about that 1,000 yards. And you know, 4 carries, 10 yards. By the way, that defense was phenomenal. Texas Tech finished, or Texas Tech, Oklahoma State finishes with 147 yards. 86 of them came on the last drive against the second team defense. That defense was phenomenal, and it was Chidozie, Shane Cokes, it was BJ Green, it was you name it. Nikai Hill Green, Levante Bentley, Cam, Shiloh. Shiloh had some monster hits in that game. Um, that whole defense. Yes, it was the Travis and Shador show, and I totally agree with you. But that defense,
Oh yeah.
congratulations on a shutout. That was well
Oh no.
deserved.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's why I opened with, what a way to bounce back from the week before
Right.
after getting
Yeah.
run over. And I just say a lot of guys throughout the year stepped up on that side of the ball where last year you didn't have those options. It just speaks to the depth that they were successfully able to add. And it's fascinating. At the beginning of the year, we looked at, all these positions are like, oh, wow, they got a lot of depth here, at least on paper. And, we'll see how it looks on the field. And I think one comment I made to you is by the end of the year, you're never as deep in certain areas as you thought you were at the beginning of
Yeah.
the year.
Mhm.
I don't know. Receiver, they were really deep at. Line, they were deep enough. Now, tackle, they weren't very deep, but line, I thought they were deep enough. Okay. I mean,
Enough
deep,
is the key word there.
deep enough. Deep
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other injuries might probably would have been a significant issue for that
Yeah.
unit. I mean, what would they have done if I mean, I didn't know that Khalil Benson got hurt either. He was on the field walking around in a walking boot. That might have happened in practice or something. So
Yeah. I mean, you realize they played most of that game with two walk-on linemen.
And two walk on and Seton and Cleveland, I guess, are freshmen, right? So two
Yeah.
walk on and technically two freshmen.
Yeah. Because Cleveland and Ben Resnick was your right tackle most of the game. So
Yeah.
you played the majority of that game with two walk-ons and a true freshman left tackle who's really
Yeah.
good.
Right. While we're on that note, that's the one position I'll be curious to see how they handle for the bowl game. It'll probably be a
Yeah.
rotation, I'm guessing, or maybe
Yeah.
Khalil's back by then. But obviously, right tackle for the bowl game, I think that'll be an interesting spot. But yes, again, you bring up the defense. Their running game, we talked about it, without Augustive, they just have not been able to really produce consistently. But
And I was
well,
wrong. Credit to you. We had a little bet for a soda. I was like, they're going to rush for 100 yards again. Oklahoma State's run defense is awful. Well, not against CU.
I'll say this was your soda. Yeah, I look, it
Uh,
is what it is. They can't run the football right now, really, without Augustive. They figured out a few ways to do it, but
they can barely run it with him, but
buddy, they are. I mean, so out of curiosity, while we're here, do you know off the top of your head what they finished last year FBS in rush offense
I
or
think they were
around?
last. I think they were
Were they
last.
dead last? They
Pretty
probably
sure.
were dead last. This year can't be that much higher.
No, they were dead last. They were dead last going into last week, and they rushed for 33 yards.
So two
So
years in a row, they were dead last in rushing.
yeah, let me double check it. There might have been Hawaii. I think was pretty bad last year. They might have been the only one worse. Um, yeah, Colorado's last, 134th, 70 yards a game. Next up above them is Kent State at 77 yards a game,
Now we'll say
and
that sack yardage had a lot to do with that, but
it did.
one of the things moving forward, you got to
They were
focus
they were
on.
dead last year. They averaged one more yard per game this year than they did last year.
Oh. Well, so and there's a couple of reasons I want to bring that up. One is there are so many negative plays in there, and Shador I mean, does such a good job of erasing those. We watch college football every weekend, and you see teams get in third and long and just not be able to move the football. With Shador, that's never a concern. So even
Right.
if he does take a 15-yard sack, it's like, well, let's see what they can pull off on this next play. Moving forward, you cannot, be like, yeah, well, I think Juju will be able to handle that. Just don't plan for
Yeah.
it. That's what I'm saying. Excuse me. The other part of it was, you know, they're going to have to do some things differently with how they handle it, and they need some other backs. They
Yep.
they we as you brought up, I was it last week or the week before. Like you're looking at different level caliber players in the portal. You need one all conference back. You need a
Yeah.
thoroughbred back
You,
there,
you
like you do.
I think you need a guy that's proven he can do it. And that
Yeah.
he's done it already. I mean, I brought up I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. We talked about UCF, how they already had RJ Harvey, and I know UCF wasn't very good this year, but that's not the point. The point is they already had RJ Harvey. They go out and get Penny Boone, who was a 1,400-yard rusher. Uh, what was it, Kent State last year? He was in the
Hmm.
MAC somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what you need to get. You need a
Yeah.
guy that has been an all conference guy. I don't care which conference, if it's a Power Five, great, but you need a guy that's already done it. I would like to see them get a guy that's been 1,000-yard rusher somewhere.
How about DJ McKinney's old roommate?
Well, that
I'm
would
just saying he got a pretty good taste of what it looks like now with Coach Prime at Colorado in that ass whooping his team took.
he
So
did only have 10 yards, but he's better than that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So final notes, at least for me on that game. Trav probably should have had 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I just keep coming back to him. Like we can
He
highlight
dropped a
everybody
couple, yeah.
else. He
Yeah.
did. I mean, and obviously one of them would have been a really tough play. The other one hit
Yeah,
him
right,
right in
right.
the chest. But we've just,
It would have been a really
just
tough play for anybody else. And it was a tough play for Travis, but we've seen Travis make tough plays.
and even the one hand where he just rises above everybody and then gets hit and like does
Yeah.
a flip in the air. Thank
Yeah.
goodness he was okay on that play, but you heard the crowd's reaction to that. It was almost like surprised he didn't make the play,
Right.
and you and I were kind of having this conversation. What did I say to you the other night? We were talking about how hard it will be to put how good Travis is into words. And I said, he's so good that you're almost more surprised when he doesn't make the play
Right.
and the plays he's making have your jaw on the floor, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that. And so
Yeah.
the point is that we got lucky, man. After what
Yep.
we've watched for a couple of decades, we got really, really fortunate. And, I don't really have any other big notes on the Oklahoma State game. Really cool way to finish everything out. Everybody contributed. Senior class, they showed up for them. Outside of a wonky second quarter, they dominated that team. And even in that second quarter, the defense dominated. So, not much more you could ask for a final send off
Mhm.
for the group that turned CU around.
Yeah. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about where they go from here and what it's going to look like next year. But yeah, awesome send off, and I'm looking forward to a bowl game. It's disappointing. We all thought we might be going to Arlington this week. We're not, and that's disappointing. I know, but hey, there's still a shot to have a 10-win season. They've only had a few of those in program history. They haven't won a bowl game in 20 years. There's still some really good things, and a week from today, Matt, Heisman Trophy finalists are announced, and we know one's going to be there.
Mhm.
Are two going to be there?
After Cam Ward lost the other day, and you go and you look at all those numbers, man, and what Shador has had to do these last 2 years with almost with below average protection. If we're just going to average out these last 2 years, they've gotten
Yeah,
better this year, but well below what any of his peers were dealing with.
yeah,
Any of his peers, if you put them in this system, Colorado doesn't have nearly the success, and vice versa. If you put Shador at Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, they're undefeated and going to win a national championship this year. So for me, I have it right now. Hunter, Genty, Sanders. Gabriel probably gets that third spot, in my opinion, because I think Heisman voters are just going to look at the fact that Shador has 3 losses, which, hey,
yep,
man, I understand that's how it's gone, right? It's typically Heisman voters view it as quarterback on the best team versus just the best quarterback. I was really glad to see Shador won the Unitas because I was worried that we were going to see all those go Cam and Dylan's way.
yep.
Shador deserves it. His numbers are outstanding. They far surpass anybody, in my opinion, as far as the most impressive numbers this year, considering. So I would hope so. He's obviously in my top 3. He'd probably be 2 for me. It'd probably be Hunter, Sanders, Genty. I congratulations. Ashton's a hell of a player. The Mountain West is as bad as I've ever seen it this year. And he tailed off from where he started. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. What else do you want me to say on that one?
Yeah. And you and I were talking about this beforehand. And the thing is, I see a lot of this narrative, and I don't like this narrative. I was telling you beforehand that, if Shador's not a Heisman finalist, it's because he's a Sanders. I completely disagree with that. I think if he's a finalist, it's because, not because, but a big reason because he's a Sanders and because he's had so much attention and in the spotlight so much. I think that could get him there. Um, the reason he would not be, the two reasons why Shador would not be a finalist are number one, Travis. He's got the best player in the country on his team, and so that's going to hurt Shador a little bit. But number two is, look, history suggests that Heisman voters, they want their quarterbacks to be undefeated or one loss. I think last year Jaden Daniels won it. They were 9-3. LSU was. That was sort of an exception, but Jaden Daniels didn't have Travis Hunter on his team. I mean that was kind of a one-man show. Uh, Jaden Daniels was the reason they were 9-3, and so that was different. And I was telling you beforehand, I did research earlier this year. You just don't have two guys from a 3-loss team going to New York. In fact, the history of this award, there's never been two guys from the same team that were top 5 for a team that lost 3 games. And so if he gets there, it's in part because he's Sanders and because of the hype.
All right,
In
yeah,
part, obviously he
yep.
earned it.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
no, I
want.
get
I'm
it. I was
not
just going to
taking away
no, no,
from
no.
that,
I know.
but
I just want to clarify what you're really saying there. Shador has the best quarterback numbers if you look at any of the quarterbacks in the country.
yes,
However, typically teams with 3 losses, their quarterbacks compared to teams who are, one
yeah,
loss, undefeated, they don't get highlighted, right? But
right,
because of the exposure of this program, more people actually do know about Shador. Now, does his last name draw ire and hate? Of course it does. We've
sure,
all dealt with
yeah,
that for 2 years. But
hmm
in the context of this conversation, in any other year, most likely a quarterback, even if they had Shador's type of numbers, had they had 3 losses, if you had other candidates with undefeated records or one loss, they
Yeah.
wouldn't have even been considered. But
Right.
because of what Colorado has been able to do from an exposure standpoint, everybody is able to recognize that, yeah, we're tuning in to watch the Sanders because that kid is the best quarterback in the country. But
Yeah.
Heisman voters tend to operate and evaluate quarterbacks more than anything else over, with wins.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is
And
funny because when you put Gabriel's numbers and Shador's
mhm,
numbers up together, I mean, it's not even a
it's
contest.
not even a contest. And so, and yes, what I'm saying is, to me, Shador's the best quarterback in the country.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. You put him on Oregon, and they're still the number one team in the country and probably more dominant. You put him on Ohio State. Ohio State didn't lose to Michigan the other day. I promise you that. And so you put him on Miami, and Cam's pretty good, but I think Miami's better with Shador. So I think he's the best quarterback. But all I'm saying to listeners is, if he doesn't get there, it's just because that's not how voters have operated throughout history. And you know, I'm a history guy, but let me just throw this out there. And I think I've done it before, but since 1982, when they started inviting finalists to New York, there's only been one time when two teammates were invited to New York that weren't undefeated. So let's see, there's only been 8 times when teammates have been invited. 7 times their teams were undefeated and ranked 1 or 2 in the country.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception was Oklahoma in 2016. They were number 7 and they were 10-2, and it was Baker Mayfield and D.D. Westbrook, and they were 10-2. So there's never been a 3-loss team. And so if Colorado gets 2 there, Buff fans need to celebrate because it's history. It's never happened before, and it shows you that the voters are showing Colorado a ton of respect for what they've done, because it's just never happened before. History suggests now that Dylan Gabriel could be there because he's the quarterback of the number one undefeated team in the country. But I sent you something earlier today, as long as we're talking Heisman here. Um, you know, when you look at those 3 top quarterbacks, right? I sent you this Miami, number 1 in the nation in scoring, 12.7 points more per game last year when they didn't have Cam. Colorado, number 24 in scoring, 34 and a half. It's 6.3 more than last year, but a 19 points per game jump from 2022 before they had Shador. Oregon with Dylan Gabriel. They are trying to find it here. 9 points per game less this year than they did last year with Bo Nix. So Oregon's offense is worse with Dylan Gabriel than it was with Bo Nix.
Oh, I don't even think it's a question. Bo
No,
was a much better player.
right.
Yeah,
But
not
my
even a
point is,
question.
of the 3 quarterbacks, 2 of them have elevated their team. The other one I think is a really nice player who has a loaded team around him.
He's plugged in right into the system.
He's exactly in the system. And
Yeah.
he's a really good player. But I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that could go into Dylan Gabriel's situation and be just as successful as what Dylan's doing.
100%. Dylan's numbers just, I mean, when you look at them compared to Shador,
Yep.
he's so far behind Shador. And then you have to factor in the context of how much pressure and dysfunction. Shador's doing all this by himself with virtually no running game. Although
Yeah.
I do find it interesting when Colorado eclipsed 100 yards on the ground this year, they were 5-0. And that was one thing that I told you at the beginning of the year. If this team gets to 120, they will win every game en route
Yeah.
to a national championship. And I
Mhm.
firmly believe had they been able to rush for 120 against Kansas, that game may have been a shootout, but it doesn't end up like that. And
Right.
they just couldn't do it either. So look, Brian, I am, and obviously the reason for that is because you extend the clock, you extend drives, you don't allow
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
as much time, and so it would have been a different ball game. But moving forward, obviously something to address. That's pretty much all I had on the Heisman. Travis is going to win. I don't know if you saw this, but Travis had a pop-up shop the other day on the hill.
Yeah.
He did some sort of
I
thing,
saw that.
and some fan gifted him, which what a gift from this fan. I mean, I
Yeah.
hope Travis does something for him. A game-worn, signed Rashawn Salam jersey, gifted it to Travis, which that to me is like, holy cow, that's as cool of a gift as you can get. Travis can buy anything he wants.
Yeah.
Like that is as cool a gift as you can give. And I put out there, I want to see him rocking that walking into the bowl game because that would be really awesome, man.
No,
With the Heisman, you
what
know,
what I would love to see is him rocking that at a Heisman press conference in New
perfect.
York.
Yeah, well, maybe
That would
not.
be
It's New
even better
York.
than the bowl
Maybe a
game.
little suit and
But
tie, huh, for the
now,
Heisman.
I hope that fan got like a Hunter signed jersey in
I'm
exchange.
sure Travis is going to take care of him. I'm
But
sure
yeah,
Travis is. You know what he did, and if you know, I forget sometimes that some people are on Twitter, some people are not. After the game, Travis went around the entire field and signed anybody who had a 12 jersey that he could find.
yeah,
Travis understands what it means to touch people's lives, even if it's just for a few minutes. What he did by doing that is giving everybody in there a moment they'll never forget. Not
yeah,
to mention Shiloh, who jumped into the stands to hang out with the fans afterwards. Boulder really made an impression on these guys. And I don't think at the beginning they anticipated it was going to the way it did. But
mhm,
at the end of the day, all of them, I think, appreciate what they were afforded here, and we appreciate what they afforded us here. So it's worked out so well for both parties. It's not like, hey, well, Prime, for those of you who don't know, we always talked about the Colorado job for a long time being a lily pad, where you
yeah,
come here, you do well, and you bounce to a big school.
mhm,
What fans have wanted is somebody who's committed, and they hit the jackpot. I put out a tweet the other day that listed all the accomplishments I could think of in the last 2 years. When you actually write it down, it's jaw dropping, honestly.
yeah,
It's like, oh my God. Like when you really think about the total context of what they've accomplished and what they've done, it, I don't know how it could have possibly gone any better. The only way would have been not tripping up one of those times this year and ended up with
right,
the conference title game. But my
right,
gosh, I mean, that's such a first world problem position to be in compared to where this program has been, that it's tough not to marvel at the job they've done and be incredibly excited about the future of the program.
yeah. I wrote one last thing on Travis is look, he said it a couple times, and there was a Zoom. I don't know if you were on it or not, but
I wasn't. I we were traveling, I think.
yeah, a couple weeks ago, they did a Zoom. He and Shador did one with national media, and we were on there. But he was talking about Colorado, and he's talking about the impact Colorado's made on him. And he's mentioned before, I hope I can. I wish I could be a Denver Broncos. So I could stay in Colorado, my neighbors, all this stuff. And he actually said that last week or 2 weeks ago that he could see himself living in Colorado because he just loves it so much. And like when you say stuff like that, this fan base is like
Hmm.
they're gonna love you forever. And so,
Yeah.
and he's talking about like he had never really seen snow, a whole lot. And he gets to drive and see the mountains with snow on them and reminds him of Christmas. And and you listen to him talk, you're like, man, he's talking giddy. He's excited about like these basic everyday things that we get excited about. And it endears him to Colorado fans more so when he talks like that about their state, that he loves it so much. And so, when Coach Prime says it, when Travis says it, these guys say it, you're like, wow, they really love it here.
I
And
mean, it'd
so
be hard not to. I mean, it's such a
it
beautiful,
would be,
it's such a beautiful place.
but because the narrative a lot nationally is these guys don't give a crap about Colorado. They're here for Coach Prime. They don't give a crap. To hear them say that is like, nah,
Well,
they really do. You know,
well,
it's made
here
it.
for Coach Prime and loving Colorado are two different stories. Okay.
I agree with you, but I mean, yes,
Yeah.
they're here for that. But I mean, the national narrative was always that they don't give a crap about Colorado. They're just here and they're going to balance all this stuff.
Yeah.
But
We knew
to
that
your
wasn't true.
to your point, you know, I agree with you. I think Colorado made a bigger impression on these guys than they even thought it would, and I think that's what's in part endeared them to fans so much is that they've loved their state and they've loved being Buffs, and so it's been a fun ride. We get one more, and hey, next week we get to go to New York, and I think we're going to celebrate Travis winning the Heisman, and we'll see if we get to see Shador as a finalist as well.
Yeah. The one thing to close out the Colorado conversation, Coach Prime lives in his office. I hope everybody understands that Coach Prime has the best bedroom view in Boulder.
Yeah,
Okay. Like
right.
that is, you wake up every day and look directly at the Flatirons. It's not even about being in the stadium. Like
Yeah,
he's got the best view of the mountains that exist in the whole town. You're right in the heart of it. And so,
yeah,
to be able to have that environment where people leave you alone, it's safe, it's a bubble here. I mean, people are friendly, it's a healthy place to live. no humidity. You don't have to deal with that stuff. It really doesn't get cold here, like cold here.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. It's not Midwest cold. Trust me. I mean, it might be. And I think the one thing I learned is 50 degrees. The one thing I learned this year about middle America, 50 degrees in Texas might as well be 20 degrees in Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some cold road trips down there, and the humidity makes a difference. So it grows on you a lot for sure. And, it doesn't mean that they'll be here forever. Neither one of us expect that. We both know that at some point it'll come to an end. But I think the one thing that we always talked about as CU fans with McCartney is it was just kind of like, wasn't his whole thing just get him to Boulder?
Yeah.
And it had been a while since a coach had come along with the capabilities of taking advantage of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And when you build a winner here, you're beloved here. I mean, I think that's probably the case everywhere, but here it's a little different because we do have a bit of that small town community vibe that doesn't exist in, some of these other, bigger markets. So it's a cool place to be.
Well, and
Yes, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
the funny thing is, that's one thing. All these national people that keep talking about Coach Prime going to other jobs that they have never understood is that that's Coach Prime. The people that say, "Oh, put him in L.A. or whatever," like he needs the spotlight. No, he doesn't. He doesn't want that. Do you not pay attention to the fact that he lives way outside of Dallas on a ranch? He doesn't want neighbors. He likes his alone time. He likes to be in this bubble. He's a country guy. And so I think people miss that part of it when they're trying to speculate where he's going to go. Like he has everything he needs right here in Colorado.
LA doesn't need him. Or excuse me, he doesn't need LA. LA needs him. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
that's where these other markets are struggling. They need a fire starter like that. He doesn't need to be there to start a fire. He
Right.
can do that wherever he is. And
Right.
as you brought up, go look at all those videos on well off of his place in Texas. He likes wide open spaces. He likes to
Mhm.
be secluded. He likes to be alone. You can get that here, and it's an amazing place to live. So yeah, there are some drawbacks for me. The food, does it suck here? Yeah, it sucks here. You kind of have to eat for sustenance. Coming from Chicago, trust me, I get it. I'm a Chicago snob
You're
there. But
spoiled. I disagree with you there. I grew up here and I'm fine.
exactly. That's my point. You grew up here. I'm from Chicago. Okay. My point is, and he's talked about it, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe I don't have some of the comforts of home, but my God, like with everything else you have here, those are some trade-offs you're willing to make. And who knows, maybe, he'll start a chain of his own restaurants, downtown Pearl Street. Hey, Pearl Street needs to be revamped, baby.
Well, hey,
Go, let's see it.
and when you're in Coach Prime's position, if there's some food things you don't like, you know what you do? Hey, Chef Solomon,
Yeah,
here,
that's right.
put
Yeah.
this on the menu.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. I got that whenever I want it. So
Yeah.
so he's
No,
good.
he's got
He's good.
everything here. He's got
Yeah.
everything he needs. And New York will be fun in a couple of weeks, hopefully. Um and yeah, we'll celebrate Travis winning the Heisman. I'm sure we'll find a way to do something out there, and then we'll have another week off, and then San Antonio the week after, or am I missing one in there?
It'll be 2 weeks from Heisman to the bowl
Okay.
game. So but yeah, I think that'll probably wrap it up for this week. And next week we'll come back. We'll do a show because a week from now we're going to know where they're going to a bowl game. We're going to know who the Heisman finalists are. We'll be able to talk in
More
specifics,
recruiting too.
more recruiting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, we didn't even get into that today, but we'll have plenty to talk about next week. Signing day is Wednesday. Saturday night, or no, it was
Thursday
Thursday.
night.
Thursday night was a massive recruiting night for the Buffs. So, but we'll get into all that next week because there's no game to react to and all that stuff. But yeah,
One thing. Hey, to all the listeners, since we are going to have some more time, if you guys have comments or topics or questions that you want us to hit or maybe touch on, make sure you're dropping them in the comments because Brian and I will check it out, and maybe we'll do
yeah,
like a fan Q&A thing. I think that could be fun.
yeah, sounds good. And Matt, have a good week. We'll see you next week early.
Next week, buddy. Next week. No presser tomorrow. No
No
presser
pressure this week.
tomorrow.
No access to us this week as the Buffs kind of take this week off and wait their fate. And
Good.
so we'll be back next week.